Hey everybody, and welcome to the D&D podcast. Today, what I want to talk about is how to play D&D for those of you who you've never really tried to play it before, but it interests you to an extent. I know I've made videos about the classes before, but I never really went into detail on what it really meant, or what these abilities really meant, or why should it matter if your hit die is bigger than why should it matter if the barbarian's hit die is bigger than the fighter or the druid? So, I'm going to give just a very brief breakdown. If you guys want me to expand upon it, I can. But this is the gist of how to play D&D. Now, Dungeons and Dragons, well, it has gone through a lot of iterations from the original 2nd edition, 3.5 edition, the not really talked about taboo 4th edition, and the current 5th edition. I will just be talking about 5th edition for the most part, but a lot of the role-playing elements really apply to all of the editions. Now, Dungeons and Dragons is a dice-based game. You roll a d20 for pretty much everything. There are a lot you don't roll a d20 for, but for the most part, when you roll a die, it's going to be a 20-sided die. Now, you want to roll high on this die, because the higher you roll, the more likely you are to succeed at the task you're trying to accomplish. And what I mean by that, for if you don't really know yet, D&D is a character game where you have a character sheet, and it's all driven by what you want to do as the player. Now, there are a lot of numbers that you really don't have to worry about most of the time. For example, it doesn't really matter if you've memorized what your strength modifier is, because it will be on your sheet if you need to know. Now, as a player, you have a character in the game, and you can do anything you want. If you want to go climb that ledge that the dungeon master just described to you, you can go climb up that ledge. Should have probably mentioned that you are playing with other players as well, though, and there's also a dungeon master who will basically tell you everything that's going on around you, will describe the environment, give you usually a good mental image. And you, with another group of people, usually have some kind of quest you need to do. Sometimes it's more open world and you can just do whatever you want, go wherever you want. That's fine too. Though often you start with, or it leads up to a quest. And it's up to you of how you want to accomplish it. If you want, you can just kill the guy giving you the quest and go on your own adventure. And the DM can just describe what that's like. If you want, you can follow the quest any way you like. But often, when you want to do something that will require a skill, say your quest is to go steal the crown off the king's head. Now, that normally would be a very difficult task and would require a skill check, probably a stealth skill check. You would roll your d20 die, and depending on how high you rolled is depending on how likely you are to succeed. Say you get a natural 1 on your roll. That is called a critical failure. And usually, not on a critical failure, not only do you not succeed, you usually mess up horribly and cause something else to happen. For example, say you're trying to sneak up to the king's throne to steal the crown off his head. On a critical failure, you may trip over a step up on the throne, fall flat on your face, and take damage. And if you roll, say, a critical success, it would be which would be a natural 20, which is the highest you can roll on d20, then perhaps no one even saw you at all. No one even remembers what you look like. So as you can see, the extremes are really large between the two. But there's more than just skill checks. There's also combat, which is also a heavy part of the game and usually occurs. Now, with combat, you have hit points, which are determined when you roll your character's hit die at the beginning of each level and when you level up. There are 20 levels in the game, each ranging from essentially I'm just starting out to I am the Grand Master of all time. Most games usually go from level 1 to 12, though mine usually go much higher than that, with the exception of my more recent games, which usually go from 1 to 7. Now, in combat, you have health and hit die. Whenever you attack, you're trying to get your opponent's health down to 0 or below. When you are hit, you will lose hit points. If you drop to 0 or below, you fall unconscious. But if you get so low, with one hit, I believe, you can instantly die. But that's a little more complicated, and for now we'll just say if you get to 0 or below, you're unconscious. So that is why your hit die are important, because you want to have a high amount of hit points so you don't die or fall unconscious, because when you do go to 0 or below hit points, you have to roll a d20, something called a death saving throw. You roll a die, and you can have a success or a failure. 11 through 20, no, it's a 10 and above is a success, and a 9 and below is a failure. So you roll a d20, and whenever you get 3 successes or 3 failures, that determines whether you live or die. If you have 3 successes, no, it does not have to be in a row, then you succeed. But if you get 3 failures, also doesn't have to be in a row, then you die. But thankfully, this can be prevented by having either more hit points, either being able to overpower the enemy with your own attacks, with your own abilities, or just the good old-fashioned tried and true being able to run away fast, which has saved my butt more times than I can count. There are many other parts to the game as well, for example, interacting with the other people at the table. If you're playing at a table, that is, some people sit on the ground, but usually it's at a table. You usually have to be able to get along with the other players because, as so well put by someone that taught me, D&D is not Skyrim. You are not the center of the universe. You are a part of a group, and everyone in there is, for the most part, just as equally as important as you are. So you have to be able to get along not very well, but at least well enough for that one person isn't always stealing the show, or that one person is just never have the opportunity to say anything or do anything. There has to be a good balance, because at the end of the day, everybody wants to have fun. Nobody wants to be left out. But one person won't be the star of the show, because it's not a single-player video game. It's a group-based game. Now, I have run games that was just the DM and one player. That is a little bit different, but those are extremely rare. Practically no one does them. And it was extremely difficult to craft from experience. And yeah, for 99.99% of all games, we'll have at least 2 or more players and a DM. Because a part of the fun is really just from the companionship and you and the other players having, interacting with each other, learning about each other's character. And it can be really fun, but you have to be willing to accept that you are not the center of the universe. You're a part of a group, and the group has to work together in order to accomplish tasks. Now, if there's a plot point that kind of divides the group, that can be interesting, and that's separate from if someone is trying to steal the whole show. Now, some other parts of the game are your abilities themselves. Some abilities help you in combat, some help you in social situations, and others help you with more miscellaneous things. For example, I believe the monk, at one point you just become immune to disease. To disease and poison, I believe. And that can be really helpful in certain situations. Say you walk into a room, you step on a trap, and a poisonous gas shoots out in every direction. As the monk, you're completely fine, while the wizard over there is choking to death. And you have the ability to, say, pick up the wizard and run him to safety with your extra movement speed, which you also get from being a monk. It's pretty interesting overall. And especially how those abilities work in certain situations like that. I could go into every single ability there is, but this would turn into probably a 7-hour video if I did every ability justice. And like I say in my introduction, that's not really the kind of thing I'll be doing on this channel, unless I ever decide to start streaming games or stuff like that. Though during this time that we live in, I'm not sure if I'll be able to meet up with friends in order to do that, and when we do it on Roll20, there are some certain complications for that. But back to my introduction to D&D. I talked about combat, abilities, stuff like that. But role-playing is also a big part of the game. Being able to become a different character than you are in your everyday life. To become this person you've created, to give them a personality, to give life to this character, essentially. And no, you don't have to have, say, 5 years of acting experience. It doesn't have to be done well even. But as long as the character is yours, and there's nothing wrong with just making literally you in a game. There's nothing wrong with that. But my advice is to make something that would... I like to break out from the ordinary. So often my characters are polar opposites of myself. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with just being you in a game. And the role-playing element is heavy because, well, interacting with people is such a big part of the game. For example, you go up to the shopkeeper and you can have an entire conversation with them in character, and you can try to figure out, say where the dragon is hiding. Once again, it's not really like a video game where you just click an option to interact. You actually get to choose what you say, and you say it as the character. For example, if I go in as Zoso, the Triton Paladin, to the innkeeper, and I would like a room for 5 nights, sir, and maybe the innkeeper says, well, that'll cost you a couple of gold there, and stuff like that. You talk in character, and so do the other players. At the end of the day, if it helps if you can really immerse yourself into the game that way. You don't have to do voices or anything, but to really become the character that you made is an important part of the game. I have played with people who have made characters. They've told us all about them and how they act, how they are. But then when it actually came to playing as the character, they were literally just themselves, when what they described was so different. For example, there was a wizard. He wanted to be kind of like the smart guy in the room, always silent, but would always chirp in when there was something that needed to be talked about. But this person, absolutely nothing like that. He practically never listened to other people, usually had uninformed decisions, and never shut up. We all weren't actually a big fan of that, but mainly because we were expecting something so different, but also because it really got on our nerves. That's how important, though, role-playing can be. So those are the basic corners of D&D. I could go in more detail about each individual thing, and I didn't even really touch magic and spell slots because that can really be its own video. Even though it looks a lot more complicated than it really is, it does deserve its own video to really break it down. So, I think I'll end this video here. I hope you all who haven't played the game have maybe learned something. I'm sure I could have been a lot more clear on some things. Let me know if there's anything I could have been. Give this video a like, subscribe, and I hope you all enjoyed. Until next time, roll well.